Let me start out by saying that the Bible was not written to answer policy questions, but it was written to inform our decision-making processes, and in the case of HB56, we have failed miserably. As Christians, we are called to be the moral conscience of the culture, and thus we are obligated to speak loudly and clearly to HB56. God tells us in His Word what He requires of us, and that is to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. And so justice from God's perspective involves not just social service, but social action. And that is removing the source of social suffering and injustice. And in the Bible, God identifies three groups of people as being defenseless and powerless in society: widows, orphans, and aliens. And that is why the Bible goes to great lengths to protect the alien living in our land. In the Old Testament, God is very clear when He said, "Do not mistreat an alien or oppress him." Do not mistreat an alien or oppress him. Mercy is not giving another person what they deserve. We routinely hear in the courts the judge being asked to show mercy. The law demands certain penalties, and yet within our legal system there is room for mercy. As Christians, God requires us to be merciful. In fact, in the book of James, he said that mercy will always triumph over judgment. And finally, walking humbly connotes a proper perspective in relation to God and by extension to the people around us. The idea in relation to people around us is that we do not consider ourselves better than others. Instead, we protect the interests of others and consider them better than us. Paul was very clear when he said, in humility, consider others better than yourself. And so as we evaluate HB56, we must ask ourselves, is this law just? Is this law merciful? Is this law crafted in humility? And I would submit the answer is no. In fact, the authors of this legislation, by their own words, said this was created to be harsh and punitive. Let me say that again. By their own testimony, they said this law was crafted to be harsh and punitive. Let me give you a simple illustration. I met with a couple of the men from our church this morning. One of the young men is from Venezuela. He's here legally. And he was telling me that yesterday he got to work and he realized that he left his wallet at home. And because he was afraid of being stopped without the proper identification, he had to call his wife, who has 2 small children, to load the kids in the car so that she could just bring his wallet to him so he could drive home from work. Last week there were some agents who were leaving Walmart, and the police stopped them as they left Walmart and wanted to see their documentation. They didn't have it. Now they're here legally, but they're living in fear now because they've been pulled over for no other reason than they don't look like me. And it shouldn't be that way. As such, HB56 is not just, it is not merciful, and it is not done with humility. And if that weren't enough, on top of this, Jesus teaches us that as you have done this to the least of these, you have done this to me. And what Jesus is saying is that He uniquely owns how we treat the least of these in our culture. And so from a Christian faith perspective, I cannot comfortably explain why we would treat others the way this law wants us to treat them, harshly and punitively, knowing that we will have to give an account to God. As Christians, as people of faith, we are called to a higher standard. No, we are called to the highest standard of how we are supposed to treat the people around us, and especially the powerless and defenseless in our culture. And so for these reasons, I call upon Christians and people of faith to stand against this law, to call their legislators, and to voice their objections and concerns. Thank you.